Welcome to the Quantanix YouTube channel. This is the NextLayer podcast, episode 3.
And welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive called The Dawn of Code, from stone to silicon.
Or as some call it, the journey of code, from clay to silicon.
Both work.
Yeah, they capture it well. We're going on a pretty big journey today, looking at how humans first started, encoding information, doing calculations.
Right, we've got some great sources that really trace this path. It's like uncovering the ancestors of our digital world.
From the absolute earliest methods right up to, well, today.
And the idea isn't just to list dates, is it? We want to kind of unpack the core ideas, the leaps in thinking.
Exactly. Find those connections across time. Some of them are genuinely surprising how far back these concepts go. It helps you appreciate the tech we have now, I think.
Definitely. So we're starting way, way back, before writing.
Pre-literate times, which seems counterintuitive, maybe. Encoding before writing.
But the need was there. Think about Mesopotamian clay tokens, like 8,000 BCE, tiny clay shapes.
Right, like little symbols for sheep or grain, something like that.
Exactly, used for tracking goods. And they even kept them in these clay envelopes, sort of sealed records.
Wow, okay. Like an ancient spreadsheet almost.
Kind of. And crucially, it's this idea of one-to-one correspondence. This token means one sheep. That's symbolic abstraction right there. The absolute basic foundation.
The symbol standing for a thing.
The first bit, you could say. And you also see things like tally sticks.
Oh yeah, the Shango bone. That's incredibly old, like 20,000 BCE.
Potentially, yes. The markings might have tracked, maybe lunar cycles, maybe trade counts. We don't know for sure, but it's that act of making a mark to mean something.
That fundamental need to record, to externalize information.
Yes, precisely. So these methods, they set the stage. Then you get pictograms emerging, maybe 4,000 BCE in Mesopotamia, actual drawings representing objects.
More intuitive, maybe.
A bit, yeah. And then that evolves into cuneiform, about 3,200 BCE.
The wedge shapes in clay. I've seen pictures. It's quite distinct.
Very. And the clever part is it moved beyond just pictures of things. It started representing syllables, sounds, even abstract ideas, logograms.
So it became a true writing system.
Yes. Initially for admin, keeping track of temple goods or taxes,
Yeah.
But later used for literature, laws, astronomy. It became incredibly versatile.
And around the same time, Egypt had hieroglyphics.
Right. Also around 3,200 BCE. And they were fascinatingly complex, too. They combined logograms, symbols for whole words, with phonetic symbols representing sounds.
Like a hybrid system.
Exactly. And symbols could be multi-layered. You mentioned the Eye of Horus before. It could be a picture, a concept, a sound guide. Really sophisticated encoding.
That flexibility is key. So standardization was important for cuneiform, making the symbols consistent.
There's ambiguity, yeah. And for hieroglyphs, it was that richness, the multiple ways to convey meaning. These weren't just record keeping. They were powerful communication tools.
Okay, so we've got symbols down. What about encoding math? Numbers.
Ah, well, that's the next big leap. Let's talk Babylonians. Around 1800 BCE, they used a base 60 system.
Base 60. That sounds complicated compared to our base 10.
It does to us, but it was powerful. They could solve quadratic equations, track planets. Their clay tablets show some serious math.
How would they manage that with base 60?
The key was positional notation. Just like in our system, where a 1 means something different in 10 versus 100.
Ah, so the position of the symbol changed its value.
Exactly. And that concept, that was a huge breakthrough. It anticipates the positional logic of binary, in a way.
Yeah.
Representing big numbers efficiently.
And there's that famous tablet, YBC 7289.
Yes, with an incredibly accurate estimate of the square root of 2. It shows they weren't just calculating. They had algorithms, systematic procedures for solving problems.
Which leads us nicely to Euclid, around 300 BCE.
And his elements. Specifically, his algorithm for finding the greatest common divisor, the GCD.
An algorithm? That sounds very computery.
It is. It's maybe the earliest clearly defined algorithm we know. A precise set of steps. Keep subtracting the smaller number from the larger until you can't anymore.
And the principle behind it is still used.
Absolutely. The idea that the GTD doesn't change if you replace the larger number with its remainder after division by the smaller, that's fundamental to modern crypto, modular arithmetic. It's a shift from just doing sums to defining a process.
Computation.
From calculation to computation.
Oh, people started building tools to help with the calculations.
Like the abacus.
Exactly. The Roman abacus around 200 BCE, the Chinese swan pan later, even the Inca quipu, though that's knots and strings, a bit different, but still encoding quantity.
Right. The abacus with beads on rods.
Yeah. Columns for decimal places, ones, tens, hundreds. It mechanized basic arithmetic. Skilled users could do multiplication and division, essentially by repeated addition or subtraction. They were running algorithms by hand on a device.
It's amazing how widespread these ideas were, developed independently.
It shows a universal need, doesn't it, to manage numbers efficiently?
So we have symbols, math, early mechanical aids. Now things get really mechanical, right? Gears and cogs doing the work. Yes, entering the era of mechanical computation proper. You have Blaise Pascal in 1642 with the Pascaline.
The adding machine.
Pretty much. Its big innovation was handling the carry automatically. When a digit wheel went past 9, it kicked the next wheel over. That was tricky to implement mechanically.
I can imagine. And it did subtraction, too, using something called 9's complement.
It did, which is basically a way to represent negative numbers so the machine could perform subtraction using its addition mechanism. Clever shortcut. And conceptually, it relates to how binary computers handle subtraction.
Fascinating connection. And then Leibniz built on that.
Gottfried Leibniz, yes. In 1673, his step reckoner. It could do multiplication using repeated addition, thanks to this ingenious step drum mechanism. More versatile than the Pascaline.
But Leibniz's bigger contribution, maybe, was theoretical.
Oh, absolutely. His work on the binary system, published 1703, representing all numbers with just 0 and 1.
Which seems obvious now, but back then...
Revolutionary. Purely theoretical at the time, but it's the bedrock of digital computing. He also had this vision of a universal calculus, a symbolic logic to solve arguments through calculation. It really foreshadows programming languages.
Wow. Okay, so the mechanical and theoretical pieces are starting to align. What's the bridge to electricity?
That's the electromechanical era. Really pivotal. It starts, perhaps surprisingly, with weaving.
Weaving.
Joseph Marie Jacquard's loom, 1801. It used punched cards. Holes in the cards controlled which threads were lifted, creating complex patterns automatically.
So the holes were the code dictating the machine's actions.
Exactly. A direct physical translation of code into machine instructions. And this directly inspired Charles Babbage.
Babbage and his engines. The analytical engine, 1837.
His grand vision, a general-purpose mechanical computer, had a mill for processing and a store for memory separate units, just like modern CPUs and RAM. Incredibly advanced thinking for brass gears and levers.
And Ada Lovelace saw its potential, didn't she?
She did. Her notes on it are famous. She realized it could manipulate not just numbers, but symbols representing anything. She wrote what many consider the first algorithm designed for machine execution.
Right.
She saw beyond calculation to computation.
A crucial insight. Then comes Boolean logic.
George Boole, 1847, the mathematical analysis of logic. He formalized logic using binary variables, true, false, 10, and operations like and, or, not, and.
But that was still abstract math, right?
Totally abstract at the time, just a way to analyze logical thought. The breakthrough connection came almost a century later.
With Claude Shannon.
Claude Shannon, 1937. In his master's thesis, he showed how electrical circuits, using switches that could be on or off, could perfectly implement Boolean logic.
So on-off switches mapping directly to true-false, or 10.
Precisely. Suddenly, Boole's abstract logic had a physical reality. You could build electrical circuits that performed logical operations. That is the fundamental basis of all digital computing. That's the bridge.
From abstract logic to physical circuits. Okay, now we're really heading towards the modern era, Silicon Valley time.
You got it, the digital revolution. And the key invention there, the transistor. Bell Labs, 1947.
Replacing those big, hot, unreliable vacuum tubes?
Exactly. Transistors were tiny, solid-state, reliable, low power. They made computers practical, smaller, faster.
But the real explosion came with putting lots of transistors together.
Yes. Jack Kilby's integrated circuit in 1958 and Robert Noyce around the same time, putting multiple transistors, resistors, capacitors onto a single chip of silicon.
A microchip.
That was the game changer. Suddenly you could pack immense processing power into a tiny space and costs plummeted. Moore's law kicked in. Exponential growth.
And that hardware needed software to run on it.
Of course. You saw high-level languages emerge, making programming easier. Fortran in 1957, using mathematical notation. Then things like the Unix operating system in 69, modular, flexible, and the C language in 72, designed for portability, writing code that could run on different machines. These software tools unlock the hardware's potential.
An incredible cascade of innovation, hardware enabling software, software driving new hardware uses.
A constant feedback loop. And it hasn't stopped. Now we're looking at potentially new paradigms.
Beyond silicon, quantum computing.
That's one major frontier. Using quantum bits, or qubits, they leverage quantum phenomena like superposition being in multiple states at once.
which allows for massively parallel computation for certain problems.
Exactly. Things currently impossible for classical computers. Shor's algorithm for factoring large numbers is a famous example. It could break much of today's encryption, but also enable breakthroughs in science, materials optimization.
Still early days, but huge potential. And the other frontier, biological computing.
Yeah, using DNA and molecules. The data density is just mind-boggling. Storing data in synthetic DNA sequences.
You mentioned a figure earlier, 215 petabytes in a gram of DNA.
Something like that. It's almost unbelievable density. People have encoded text, images, even malware into DNA. It could revolutionize long-term data storage, maybe even computation itself someday.
Wow. So looking back across this whole journey, what's the big takeaway?
For me, it's that code. In its broadest sense, this act of creating symbols, rules, procedures to represent and manipulate information, it's fundamentally human. It's how we extend our minds, organize societies, build technology.
From clay tokens for sheep to qubits and DNA strands, it's all part of the same continuous story.
A story of externalizing thought, making it tangible, computable. Each step, from tally marks to transistors, built on what came before.
It's been an amazing journey to trace. Thanks for unpacking all that.
My pleasure. It's a fascinating history.
Thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more deep dives on the NextLayer podcast at the Quantanix YouTube channel.
And maybe leave with